Biggest thing was the early breakout that we saw last year. Like through the first 9 weeks, he averaged 16.3 PPR points per game. My mom claims I love my mom, but my mom's a little bit out there. And my mom was telling me about how she read about how if you scold the ghosts and tell the ghosts to go away and leave people alone, that it will do that. And so she claims that she did that.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is episode 8 of Player Normal Activity. I am your host, Kraig, and thank you once again for joining me here. I have a great guest on here today. You have seen him all over the place. He's the Dynasty lead for Football Guys. And on that note, make sure you check out the combined rookie draft board that they have over there. He was one of the two main components of that this year. It combines IDP and offensive rankings, and it's just a great tool. He is one of the three founders of the Devi Royale, which is one of my favorite new up-and-coming sites. They are on YouTube, Twitter, Discord. They have a Patreon. You can find them on any sort of podcatcher that you listen to. They have all things Devi related, which is just fantastic for that growing part of fantasy football. And he is one of the co-hosts of the Coming Off the Edge show on YouTube regarding the League of Chaos that a number of Twitter people put together, and is a great follow. His name is Jeff Bell. You see him all over the place at whom J Bell tolls, which is one of my favorite Twitter handles. Jeff, thank you very much for coming on, and how are you?
Fantastic, Kraig. Thank you so much for having me, and I am thrilled to be on. When you kind of floated this idea a month ago or so, and I was excited about it. I raised my hand right away. Unfortunately, I've been a little bit busy, and so I'm so glad that we're finally able to connect and do that. So, and thank you so much for reaching out and having me on tonight.
Yeah, not a problem. I love getting great people on here to talk about a little bit of football and then something else completely different, which we'll get into. But for the player that you wanted to bring up, and we haven't talked about him at all pre-show, which is the way I like it, Michael Pittman Jr. So he's going into his third year in the NFL, wide receiver for the Colts. Tell me what you're interested in him for going into this year.
Yeah, the biggest thing was the early breakout that we saw last year. Like through the first 9 weeks, he averaged 16.3 PPR points per game. And then unfortunately, Carson Wentz hit. And Carson Wentz really fell apart through the second half of last year. The team kind of really relied on Jonathan Taylor, went away from that passing game, and Michael Pittman suffered. He dropped to 11.5 points per game. He really went from being a fringe wide receiver 1 to outside wide receiver 2 status. And so he ended the season he had that breakout, but at the same time, things fell apart. They weren't exactly where you wanted to see them. And so he's an interesting guy to me. The question is where he's kind of being valued right now is almost at that ceiling that we saw last year. And so I do have some questions on that, because it's one of those that, and I can go deeper in this. I have this theory, like the way I look at it is he broke out at the right time of the year. He broke out at the first half of the year when everybody's teams are good, everybody's paying attention to fantasy football, and everybody's noticing him. And so when he fell apart at the second half of the year, people didn't notice that as much. And so like a reverse guy would be Hollywood Brown from 2020, because early in the season, everybody's ready for him to break out. He was bad for the first half of the season. Second half of the season puts it together. People aren't paying attention anymore. And so there was a whole bunch of pushback. And so Michael Pittman broke out in the right area in order for hype to grow. And I'm kind of curious on if he's not being drafted at his ceiling, though, because I know Football Guys consensus ranks, they're kind of valuing him right now. I submitted my redraft rankings this past weekend, and there's about 18 of us on staff that have him up now, and he's landing like right in that wide receiver 13 range. And so I understand the excitement on him, and we got that early glimpse of production, but it is one of those that, you're bringing a new quarterback into that situation, and there's the lack of other targets is probably worth talking about, but at the same time, does he have room to exceed that?
So do you think with the quarterback change and just the quality running back play that they've had from Jonathan Taylor, and even Nyheim Hines has had some good play for him, do you think that, Matt Ryan is an older quarterback in a new system, to your point. Do you think they're still going to lean on that running game?
I would expect, as long as it's working, that's what they're going to do. I don't know. It's one of those that I've read through the grapevine about they want to get Nyheim Hines back involved again, and he really disappeared out of the offense last year. And so they want to use him a little bit more, and Matt Ryan's a little bit more conducive to using a pass-catching running back than Carson Wentz is. We know historically Carson Wentz doesn't use those type of players. So whether or not that is any factor at all, health is obviously going to be a big factor. That Jonathan Taylor's got to make it through the season healthy. They just added Phillip Lindsay the other day, so that's another addition to provide some depth there. But assuming Taylor's healthy, I think that's the way they're going to want to play and rely on that. But I don't know, some of the stories around Matt Ryan leaving Atlanta, it kind of sounded like he was content to maybe ride out another year or two and then go off into retirement and be happy as a Falcon. And then they kind of were down to the end in that Deshaun Watson sweepstakes, and he was not happy about that. And so he made comments basically afterwards saying, I plan to be a Falcon for life, but the moment they did that, I wanted out. And so I think he's going to be plenty motivated. It's going to be one of those that, are they going to have secondary targets? Are they going to be able to just rely on running the ball? Or is Pittman just going to be the guy? And if that's the case, is he going to be able to deliver against that defensive attention?
Yeah, to your point about the other pass catchers, I mean, you have like rookie Alec Pierce, Paris Campbell, who health reasons and other things just hasn't panned out. Kiki Cooney, I mean, Desmond Patton, Ashton Doolin, it gets sparse really quickly. And they have some nice tight ends, but I agree with you about Matt Ryan. I think he's going to come out wanting something to prove, and he also has to feel better about his situation for trying to get into the playoffs. There wasn't a whole lot of hope at all in Atlanta for that, and now I think the Colts have to be the favorite to win that division at this point with everything they have. But do you think that Matt Ryan at this stage of his career is better than the washed-up Phillip Rivers that Michael Pittman Jr. had year one, or face planting Carson Wentz last year?
I do. I do think that Ryan has still got a little bit more in the tank. Rivers he couldn't go vertical at all. Like he was done, and there wasn't any mobility there. I don't really expect mobility out of Matt Ryan. And then Wentz, it's crazy because like the first half of last year, he averaged about 230 passing yards per game, and then the second half of last year, it dropped down to about 160. It just like completely fell apart, and so he's gonna have to be better than that, I would think. But it does come down to, how does this team really want to play? And assuming Jonathan Taylor's healthy, they're going to want to ride him. And God forbid anything happens to him, then what is this offense going to be? Is going to be a major question.
So I know you mentioned where the sort of consensus for football guys is for redraft. How do you feel about him dynasty-wise? Like, is he in your top 20, top 25?
He is, I believe I've got him at wide receiver 17 in my dynasty rankings. And it's kind of weird. It's one of those that I think I've got him a little bit higher for redraft than dynasty, because I think I value some of the rookies that we saw come in during this class higher than him is part of it. And just kind of maybe some younger players that are in different situations more than him long term. I think I don't know. I feel like they are not done adding to the room, I guess is kind of how I look at it. And I don't know if I view him as a wide receiver one long term, ideally for an NFL team. I think some of that lands on how much Alec Pierce is able to develop. If Alec Pierce is able to develop into a true number 2 wide receiver, I think that could be enough to give him support to be that wide receiver one. But at the same time, if that really doesn't happen, I think they're going to be looking and, what do they add long term?
I mean, one of the good things about him, he does have that good size. He has that, good experience in college where he played 4 years and had the breakout year at USC his senior year. But on the Devy side of it with him, I wanted to sort of get your thoughts on this more of a general thing. But he comes from an NFL pedigree. His dad played in the league for like 11 years, was a running back. I've seen this on the defensive side of the ball, but just general as an idea. Do you like investing in Devy, or once they get to the NFL, some of these sort of, I'm forgetting the exact word here, but those guys that come from that lineage, that heritage of having their fathers played in the league where they've kind of been around them, seen what it takes to succeed, and, that work ethic. Do you see a lot of those guys ending up being successful when they come from that sort of heritage?
I like to defer to that because I think the biggest thing is they understand what goes into it. And I think teams are going to be more willing to bring them in and give them an opportunity. And really, when you're playing with Devy, I mean, that's half the game, especially when you're projecting a year, 2, 3 out. You're really looking for guys that are able to make it and play. And we've got I don't know. It's going to make us all feel very old because we've got some of that coming up here soon, with Marvin Harrison Jr. at
Mhm.
Ohio State. That's a name. And Arch Manning obviously has those bloodlines. He's hitting college. So we're going to just continue to see more of it. These guys that people at our age, we grew up watching their dads, and even like Marvin Harrison. I feel like I was almost an adult watching Marvin Harrison play. So
Yeah.
the idea that his kid is going to be playing is next level. But I do think that there may be, I think a lot of the way you play Devi is you're kind of looking for safety and to get hits there and have players that flow through, especially if you're only holding like 4 or 5 Devi players. The more of those that actually become productive NFL players for fantasy is huge. And so that is a factor that I look at. And, we have in this class, not a father son, but we have a brother, James Cook, coming through for
Mhm.
Dalvin Cook. And, that there's been, I don't know that anybody's come out and said it outright, but I would have to think that that bloodline kind of played into maybe him catching that second round draft capital a little bit of a benefit of the doubt there.
Yeah, just on the defensive side of the ball, one of the guys that I remember, Antoine Winfield Jr., when he came
Oh
up,
yeah.
went higher than a lot of people had thought. And, watching him in college, I'm like, that's how his dad played. Like, he almost felt like a clone of his dad. I think he's smaller than his dad was, but he was a smart guy that knew where to be and knew what to do. And you could just tell he learned from his dad. And I myself have found value in well, I guess it's now 2 leagues that I'm in, but taking some of those guys, because I do feel, to your point, they know sort of what is expected of them and how to succeed and put themselves in the best position. And, I kind of feel the same thing with Michael Pittman Jr. here. He has that from his dad. He was taken, like I think the 8th wide receiver in that class, in his early second round capital, but there were a lot of wide receivers taken that year. Some of them have shown up better than others, but not even necessarily the top guys. Justin Jefferson was, like wide receiver 5 or 6, I think. So sometimes when you see those draft classes, like, wow, he's wide receiver 8 taken, like still in a great opportunity in top of the second round. So I don't know that there's a whole lot to read into that I've seen sometimes where, he wasn't a top wide receiver taken, but he certainly earned his place here early in his career.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't dispute that. That class was really good. Like looking back, CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson, having Pittman there, T. Higgins as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's good stuff. I mean, I don't know. I'm excited for him this year. I'm excited to see because I think he can be a wide receiver 1. But again, it's just that question in the back of my mind that are we valuing him at his ceiling? And are those players that I don't know when I'm drafting, I don't really like to target, especially for redraft guys that I'm drafting at their ceiling, because I want to kind of draft a guy that has some room to go that can reap some value out of it. And I'm not sure. I don't know. Would just be surprised to see him ascend into that like top 5 wide receiver tier.
If you were someone that had Michael Pittman Jr. already on his team in a dynasty league and you got offered a 2023 first, I know you're really fond of those with that draft class coming up. Would you be taking that?
Man, he's kind of right there. I think that so I've got him in a couple spots, and one is a 14 team league, and I don't know that I would take the 23 first for him in a 14 team league because who knows where that's going to land. But
Yeah.
a typical standard 12 team league, I guess it would really kind of have to come down to team construction where I feel like I'm in the cycle. Who's giving me that pick? Like, do I trust them that if they're giving me that pick, or it's one of those that I don't know that I would give a late 23 first for him, but if I felt good that that team was not going to be making the playoffs, I would make that deal all day.
All right. Well, it will be interesting to see how it plays out here. Again, he's going to be the big guy in the room unless there's some sort of crazy trade or big signing. I don't think there's any big name wide receivers really out there that would take over his place as the alpha and that wide receiver core. But we've seen crazy trades happen this year, and the Colts seem like a team that are going all in, trying to win that division and make a playoff run. So it'll be great to see how it plays out for him. And with that, we're going to move on here. We're going to go from the football field to the Fortean. But before we do that, I want to thank you wherever you're listening. If you're listening to this on your podcatcher of choice, YouTube, thank you. On YouTube, make sure you hit that thumbs up. Subscribe if you're not already. And turn on notifications if you like getting those to know when these drop every Friday. So, Jeff, the paranormal topic. I love these, and you were excited to tell this one. You have a ghost story for us.
I do have a ghost story. So my parents' house was built in the 1800s, and it's an
Wow.
old farmhouse, and it's a very, very old house. And I grew up out in the country in this house, and it's just there was a bunch of it was things that maybe I didn't really notice like when I was younger because old houses creak, make sounds, whatever it is, and so you don't really think about that, especially like there was a lot of wind where we lived, so if it was blowing, like you'd hear stuff, whatnot. But then, like when I was older, like things started to get a little bit more interesting, and I know that there was one time we woke up and like on the my dad had like his computer hutch area or whatnot, and we woke up, we go downstairs, and we had like this, you remember like in the 90s like puffy paint and like that you would put on shirts. Well, we wake up one day and there was like a big circle that was painted on the wall above my dad's computer, like going like swirling out like a very like a absolute perfect circle. And so that was a weird thing that we saw. And then my sister had a friend that claimed that she could see ghosts, and she said that, oh, you guys have a ghost, it just walks around. But it got real interesting when I was in college, and my brother upstairs in my brother's room, my brother was the one that always had run-ins with the ghost, apparently. And I stayed in his room one year when I was in college on home from break, and I was sleeping, and it was one of those that you kind of wake up and I couldn't lift my arm. My arms were like this, and I could not lift my arms up. Like something was holding them down. And then all of a sudden like my arms like flew up, and I kind of sat up in bed a little bit, and there was an aura like kind of next to me. It wasn't like you couldn't see a person or anything like that, but it was just one of those like you feel energy like next to you. And so like I reached back and I flipped the light on. Obviously nothing's there, but that was my ghost story, and it was terrifying. Like it was, I don't know, there was it would, but again, one of those things that growing up, like all kinds of things, and once that kind of happens, like you kind of look back and think, well, oh, okay, well, there were probably other things that I didn't even think about or realize like going on through this. And so don't usually really stay at my parents' house very much anymore. They're about 2 hours away, and now I drive home and go to sleep in my bed usually when we have events going on with them. But that is my ghost story. So that was my encounter.
So, with your siblings, had they ever reported anything weird, like seeing an aura or anything else like that, or was it
So
just sort of minor things like that?
it seemed that my brother did not have a good relationship with the ghost. It was I have two younger sisters and a younger brother, and I'm the oldest, and my brother seemed to be the one that had the problems with the ghost, that like he would always have random stories. And it was one of those that my brother was the type that he would tell you something and he'd be like, sure kid, I hear you. And so he was always kind of that kid growing up, but he always had like different run-ins, and would had all kinds of different stories that going on. And I don't know if it was, my mom claims that she tells me that somebody had gotten murdered in that house. And so at one
Wow.
point in time, like years and years and years and years ago, but that was the story that I was told, but who knows? And
Yeah.
I've always, it's one of those that I was always interested in the paranormal, but you always have that like level of skepticism with it, and all
Yeah.
that stuff. And like, sure, okay, whatever. But having that experience, like it, I don't know. It's one of those where it's like I'd love to learn more, and I'd love to specifically learn more about that house, what's going on, but like I don't know that I believe what anybody would tell me type thing. It's like that balance between like I don't know, you see ghost hunters and all these things, and
Yeah.
so it's like I believe that ghosts are real. I don't necessarily believe that the interactions that people have with them are real, and so that kind of balance.
Yeah, it's important, I feel, whenever you're hearing anything, is to have healthy skepticism. Even on those ghost shows, some of that stuff they've disproven, which I like to see. Now, how much of the rest of it is stuff that they're putting on for show? Anything on TV, you got to be concerned about that.
Yeah.
But when you're hearing stuff from your own family, by and large, when they're telling you the truth and when they're trying to pull your leg. Your parents, either at the time or, after the fact, once you're an adult, did they ever say anything about it, or they just say that you guys were full of it?
My mom claims my mom is I love my mom, but my mom's a little bit out there. And my mom was telling me about how she read about how if you scold the ghosts and tell the ghosts to go away and leave people alone, that it will do that. And so she claims that she did that. But I never heard, I don't know, the paint thing was weird because it was one of those where it was like there was no way anybody in our family could have done that. Like it was like just like this perfectly swirly circle that's very high up. Like the kids were young. Like I was the oldest by a good margin, and so like I was like 12 when that happened, and so like my youngest sister was like 2. So it's not like they were doing anything like that.
Yeah.
So and certainly I assume my parents didn't do that. My dad did love to. I'm still to this day I struggle to watch ET because my dad would like he would we talked about pre-show we had a register that would go up to the bathroom up in the top, and he would wait until we were up there and he'd talk like he'd say he's ET, like talking through the thing. So that always freaked me out. So I still don't even watch ET, unfortunately, but I feel like I should give that one another chance. Maybe with my daughter I will. But it was one of those, my dad always liked to play tricks on me, but I can't imagine my dad painting the wall just to get kind of pull her leg a little bit.
Well, that's a weird thing to never, come clean about if he had done that, because, how many years later, what would be the point in keeping that up? You're an adult. You're not going to be really just sitting there thinking, what's dad doing to me? So,
Right.
Who knows? People keep weird things close to the vest for years, but yeah, that's crazy. I haven't ever had anything, anything like that at all. My parents' house it was built in the 70s too. It had one owner before them. I think she might even still be alive. There's footsteps in that house, and my brother and I heard it when we were in the basement. You would know after living for how many years who's walking around upstairs by their weight and their gait and things like that. And even when no one was in the house, you would hear footsteps. Finally, when we adults moved out of the house, both my parents admitted, yeah, we've heard it too. But that's literally the only thing that's ever happened there. So it's like,
Yeah.
Is it just something weird with the house, or is there something really there? Some of the stuff you never really know, but when something's off when you've been in the house for that long and you have some just crazy experience you can't explain.
Yeah, and it's one of those too. It's you grow up in the house and you're like something strange, but like until like I feel like until I get to college and you move out and you like realize like okay, this is actual life, like not in this house, and it's one of those that you realize looking back, or like when you go back and visit, that like something's off in this place. But it was again, the basement is wild. The basement's like almost looks like Silence of the Lamb basement. Like stone, it's like dirt floors and like stone walls, and so like it's just an old farmhouse that goes back to like I said, like 1800s I think is when it was built. I was trying to figure out the exact date prior to the show when it was built, but I wasn't really able to find those records like I wanted to. But I know it's because we bought it. The guy that lived there for like 50 years sold it to us, and it was certainly very, very dated.
Yeah, that the older the house is, the harder that stuff to find. I mean, even now in most states, like if someone had died there, they have to disclose that stuff, in the records for the most part. But going back, I mean, that's a relatively new law where they even have it. But trying to figure out what happened in a lot of those old houses, good luck. You're probably never going to figure out, which just, adds to the mystery of it, really.
It does, absolutely.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and telling that. That is, as far as ghost stories, we've had a few of them, and they're all unique and just something else that, like, man, just sitting here hearing you tell that, I know the feeling of waking up with something weird, but anything like that, having my hands pinned to my chest and then seeing something. That's I always had that feeling like, yeah, I want to see something paranormal or something that I know is just out there, and then think about it a little more, like, I don't know how much I really do want to. It's one of those things.
It's like, yeah, and you can't even describe, like, I don't know, it's like can't even just really describe. It's just an experience that I had, but there was definitely a presence like in the room, and like I definitely yeah, like I said, my arms were like this, and like I was now I don't sleep like this, and so it was one of those.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and talking about Michael Pittman and going over your ghost experiences there, Jeff. And one more time, I want you to let everyone know where to find you and how they can get a hold of you if they have questions for you.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, for whom J Bell tolls, the number 4, and then everything with football guys, doing dynasty content over there, and content coming out there, and then the Devy Royale as well. You can find us Tuesday nights at 9:30. You can find us on the Patreon. And any Devy questions that you might have, just reach out on Twitter. We're happy to answer those, and you can join the Discord and we can hang out and do all that. And Kraig, thank you so much for having me on. Thank you so much for your support, and you make my day all the time. Like the gifts just grip me every single time, and I absolutely love those. And so I'm so grateful and thankful to know you, and I'm happy that we could share this time together.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And one more plug for the Debbie Royale. I mean, it's more than worth it over there at the different subscription levels that they have. They have all sorts of great content. It's a great community that they're building. So make sure you get in early on that. And for everyone listening, thank you again. I appreciate it, whether you're listening or watching after the fact. And remember, whether you are interested in Michael Pittman Jr. or Momo the Missouri Monster, we are going to have you covered here on Player Normal Activity. Thank you, and we will see you next time.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you'd like more great fantasy football content like this, please click the link down below here.